What is a scientific fact that creeps you out? Your brain is making decisions before you are even aware of the decisions it has made. It also makes decisions based off of learned behavior and you just go along with it. A study actually showed your limbs, fingers, toes, etc. react to stimuli before your brain sends the response to do so. That's just human reflex arcs. Caterpillars turn completely into goo in their cocoon, and then become a butterfly. And there is evidence they retain memories from their pre-goo days. Memories of strong positive-negative stimuli that they show preference for aversion to, even after metamorphosis. Pre-goo days. I love it. We use the expression to become a butterfly about people who have emerged from tough or dark times. So it should only be natural to talk about their past as pre-goo days. Because of some pesticides used, roaches would not go anywhere near a meth lab. Let us just take a moment to appreciate the fact we do not have so deal with swarms of cranked up cockroaches. Well, thank you for the nightmares. That as the permafrost melts, a lot of locked up methane will be released, and microorganisms there will wake up and do their jobs, breaking down organic matter, and release more methane and greenhouse gases, and possible ancient diseases. Covered 22 BC. This time, it is biblical. That there are little crab-like things crawling on your face. So if I boil my face I have a lunch. Well, more of a small snack. The mantis shrimp can see colors that our eyes are not capable of perceiving. Think about that. What else are we just not capable of sensing? Ah yes. I am eternally cursed with nightmare fuel thanks to someone mentioning something like this in a YouTube video 3. The human eye perceives different spectrums of light, for example. It can detect infrared or ultraviolet light, and so we need special instruments to observe those. Which brings up an interesting idea, that feeling that you're being watched. Even when you know for a fact that you're totally alone. Could it be because there are creatures standing right next to you, but they can only be perceived in a spectrum of light that we cannot observe? Methodika, I just got in bed. I do not need this right now. The sudden urge to jump off of a very high height. You can be physically and mentally stable to the greatest degree and still have this feeling when it's such a high height. I heard it as the call of the void, and it is a normal human thought. The best example is when you are driving along and think, for a fraction of a second, about swerving into oncoming traffic or into a tree. The brain can play tricks on you. When you look at a clock and the second hand seems to freeze for a moment, your brain is actually generating a false memory and your perception of time stretches slightly backward. Wait, what? Pay attention to the second hand of a clock. Blink, and see how long it stays there. That so many vegetables came from the same plant. Broccoli, kale, kohlrabi, Brussels sprouts, cabbage, etc. They are, botanically speaking, the same species. Humans have just bred them to emphasize different traits: buds, leaves, tubers. Imagine if humans were as genetically flexible. Imagine a person walking around with giant toes, but otherwise normal. Actually, plant genetics in general is a weird world. I mean, if we spent generations selectively breeding ourselves based on traits like giant toes, something like that could happen. Just look at dogs. A gamma ray burst could wipe out all life on Earth instantly with no warning. A ducking what? An ultra-powerful supernova that sends incredibly powerful blasts of gamma rays across the galaxy at light speed. If one hits Earth, everything is erased instantly. There is virtually no way to ever see one coming, so we would never even know it happened before we were all killed. Obligate siblicide. In some species of animals, multiple offspring are born, but only one is actually raised by the mother. The others are born only as backup in case the firstborn does not survive. When the firstborn is fine, which is the typical case, it kills the others. I have similar feelings about intrauterine cannibalism. Some mutations of just one letter in the DNA code can kill a fetus almost instantly. But some people live and have a seemingly healthy life while missing a whole chromosome. If you understand anything about biology, that is completely wild. I think mutations in cytochrome C are pretty much lethal, and cytochrome C has barely changed in millions of years. Cytochrome C, the load-bearing drywall of the genome. Just how big of a number a mole actually is. I can still remember the mole song our chemistry teacher played for us. The song is from when the world population was 5 billion. Now that we're over 5 billion strong, I want to take on that marshmallow eating thing again. That the only reason you are a functional human is that your DNA is so tangled that entire sections cannot get decoded and screw it up. Actually, better one. If you disconnect the half-s of the brain and ask them to pick out something they prefer, your hands will disagree. What is your favorite color will result in one hand choosing red but one choosing green. Go look up split brain patients. For research purposes, how does one go about disconnecting the sides of the brain? Corpus callosum. It is a thick bundle of nerves that connects the left and right brain hemisphere and allows them to communicate. Some disease or operations may cause this part of brain being damaged or cut completely. The thing is, you would likely never know what happened to you, unless you did a bunch of cool scientific experiments. For example, your eyes correspond to one part of your brain. Your left eye to your right side of brain. Your right eye to your left. Say you put a divider in between your eyes and you show both eyes a different picture. You then are tasked to draw the picture you see. The thing is, you will only see one picture, because the brain cannot communicate with each other. Say you see a triangle and you draw a triangle. Then you look on the picture you draw and you see a circle. What the? You look on the pictures that researchers gave you and indeed there is triangle and circle. But you only draw a circle. The thing is, your dominant hand was wired to the different hemisphere than the eye with which you saw the picture, and your hand correctly draw what the eye wired to the part of the brain did. But it was the different part of brain that you used when you saw the picture. This actually gave rise to silent twin hypothesis. Basically a concept that you are basically two people. One that is you and the other that is not, cannot communicate with you and just helps you with whatever tasks the dominant brain hemisphere does. But when the corpus callosum is severed, both hemispheres cannot communicate behind the scenes, so to speak, and that gives rise to errors. So from your perspective, you have basically an alien presence that can do its own thing under the right conditions. Such as hijack your hand to draw something you never saw. But they did. A fever is your body way of saying, we don't negotiate with terrorists. We either destroy the enemy or we die with them. Immune system laughing at 42C, the bacteria will die. Brain, but we will die to FFS. You get and cure cancer in your own body thousands of times a day. Excuse me. What? Your body produces thousands and thousands of cells with damaged DNA. It's a bit of exaggeration to call them cancer, but if any of these cells were to survive, they could become cancerous. Your immune system destroys them before they get to that point. This is also why if you were to live forever you would eventually get cancer, because the chances of your body missing them statistically increases. This occurs thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times a day. Your brain literally creates your own reality and your senses and body just go along with it. People think the brain sees what the eyes tell it to. But really the eyes pull up an image of blurry colors and dark spots and the brain goes cool, so the tessitry. Doctors, scientists are barely keeping up with the influenza virus. It keeps on mutating rapidly. It really wants to get inside you. At least something wants to. Thinking about how breathing and lungs work freaks me out. Once I start thinking about it, all I can think about is my breathing, and then I have to force myself to stop thinking about it. Thinking about it always switches my breathing to manual rather than automatic. Critical error. Manual blinking activated. The first AI that can successfully pass the Turing test would be able to pretend that it could not. That is terrifying. Not if you were cheering for the robots. There is something called the squeeze, where when people had old scuba suits with tubes, you could actually get sucked into the tube if the pressure was off. You were literally shredded through your own breathing tube. Hate to be that guy, but that is hard hat surface supply diving. Not scuba. Scuba is by definition self-contained. But yes, it is possible. Mythbusters showed it in rather spectacular fashion, though the pig carcass did not actually make it all the way up the tube. Spider webs were used as bandages in ancient times. That's not actually a bad idea. I mean, if you're outside in the wilderness and you're hurt, then a spiderweb is probably the next best thing if you have no bandages. The last thing I want to do in the wilderness is disturb a gigantic spider. What if the web is abandoned? The way quantum mechanics works is pretty creepy to me for reasons I cannot exactly pin down. Particles are not points. At least not that we can possibly ever observe. The best physical description of a particle's position is a wave over at least a 4-dimensional volume showing where it probably is. I say 4-dimensional because there is a non-zero time uncertainty as well. This is not a limitation on what we can observe. It is an actual testable property of particles. That they do not have exact positions, velocities, energies, times. When they are observed by interaction, the wave collapses, which still does not make it exact, just more likely to exist in a smaller space. The argument that there really is an exact point and there somewhere and it is just always hidden from observation is not true. The Bell inequality proved that. For example, because of this uncertainty, it is physically impossible to cool helium enough to freeze it at atmospheric pressure. This uncertainty even applies to the vacuum. It cannot be at zero energy, because that would violate the uncertainty principle. So sets of virtual particles pop into existence in the vacuum and stick around for an incredibly short amount of time, given by the time uncertainty, before annihilating each other in a zero net energy process. This is, very simply put, how black holes hypothetically lose mass. Pairs of virtual particles are spontaneously created near the event horizon. One enters, one escapes. The one inside annihilates a particle within. The one that leaves becomes real. Information is transported outside the event horizon in an incredibly obfuscated, but still existent, form. Meaning information is not destroyed by black holes. Then you get into the weird math. It starts raising questions about what real is. Can we say something is real if it is not testable? Or is the math describing the situation the closest to real that we can get? For example, you could look at the predicted path for a particle. There is a non-zero chance for it to take any path between 2 points. So you basically take all the possible paths, account for the probability that it takes that path, add them all up, and you can recover Newtonian mechanics from it in the classical limit. Is this actually what is happening? It is not really testable. Even the Bell inequality that I mentioned earlier has some crazy philosophical implications. It basically says one of three things are true: information travels faster than light, which we have never seen. Cause does not always come before effect, WTF. Or the universe is superdeterministic, which would disprove free will. We do not know which. People make a lot of crazy claims based on quantum mechanics. And I think a lot of it has to do with how uncomfortable the idea of living in a universe that seems to be inherently uncertain is. When the Titanic sank, none of the shoes decomposed, so there is a ton of shoes at the bottom of the ocean. Free shoes. Parasites can live anywhere inside of you, for years unnoticed. A simple migraine could be a tapeworm crawling in your brain, causing damage. Your eyes begin to blur frequently and you do not know why, and it is not getting better. Losing weight and having diarrhea, but it is not a stomach bug. Well, I guess it is. You're having a difficult time catching your breath and your chest does not feel right. It could just be some parasite hanging out, using you. Top 5 ways to intensify anxiety. Number 1 is post. Not exactly scientific or creepy, but it is close enough and I want to contribute. Mouth pipetting was a thing in labs in the 1980s. A pipette is, for simplicity's sake, a glass straw that lab staff would use to transfer liquids. Nowadays we use special bulbs that, when squeezed, would suck up the liquid for us. Kinda like a turkey baster or eyedropper. Before we had these bulbs, lab workers had to use their mouths to suck up the liquid, which meant if they were not careful they did get whatever they were sucking up in their mouth. I am currently training to be MLAT, and those fluids would usually be urine, liquid stool, sputum and so on. After being decapitated, there are still few seconds of brain activity that happen before you snuff out. I read this in the book Stiff by Mary Roach. I am not sure how much I recall or how correctly I recall, but 2 things stuck with me. Apparently they had to change the head catching baskets sometimes because the severed heads would try to chew through them. The other thing that stuck with me is that some doctor was experimenting with the heads right after decapitation. He would inject oxygenated blood into the heads and they would move their eyes around and look at him. Most of the water on the earth will rain down at some point. The creepy fact about this is that the human body is 60% water, meaning that at some point the same water that runs throughout your body, the one on your blood, bones, brain, etc., will rain down at some point. We drink human fluid and the bedfish have sex on. Think about that for a second before your next glass of water. There is more microorganisms on your body than people in Earth. There are more viruses on Earth than stars in the observable universe too. Due to relativity, it is impossible to measure the speed of light in a straight line. The only way we have measured it is by round trip with mirrors. For all we know, it could be instantaneous going one way, and half the speed of light in the other, and it would be impossible to tell. Our fellow Veritasium watcher. The existence of prions. The prion mode of action is very different to bacteria and viruses as they are simply proteins, devoid of any genetic material. Once a misfolded prion enters a healthy person potentially by eating infected food, it converts correctly folded proteins into the disease-associated form. To date, nobody knows quite how this happens.